Well, I'm up here in the High C Hills, up here just out in my backyard a little bit, just enjoying the scenery and the hills. There's quite a bit of traffic today. Hopefully that won't interrupt me too bad. But I'm trying to continue on my commentary on the Book of Mormon, and I'm still on the first chapter. I don't know when I'll get off this first chapter. There's so much information in this thing. I reread the first chapter again last night, and I finally got some other videos uploaded. I was really busy with the Obama Train Express going into Washington, D.C. on YouTube, so I couldn't upload until late last night. And Jack Welch, I was looking into his book, The Legal Cases in the Book of Mormon, brand new, just out last year, late last year. It's a profoundly interesting look into the legal cases in the Book of Mormon, such as the case of Sherem, the trial of Abinadi, the trial of Nahor, the trial of Alma and Amulek, the trial of Korihor, and then he compares Sherem and Nahor and Korihor, and he talks about the case of Paanki, the trial of Seantum, and judicial punishments, types, and so on and so forth. In his case on the trial of Abinadi, he mentions this idea in this first vision of Lehi, where he saw this council of the gods and 12 angels coming down that had the brightness of the stars. And he says this number 12 is involved in the Book of Mormon in matters of judgment. He says this on page 172. He says, God's heavenly court. This is what passed judgment on Jerusalem in Lehi's opening vision, 1 Nephi 1, verse 13. This consisted of 12 members, according to verse 10. This idea of the 12 involved in a judicial setting. Very interesting how 12 in its variations, 24, 144, 144,000, and so on and so forth, how this is involved in the ancient Israelite scheme. But not only that, it goes far broader and deeper in history and myth than we've heretofore supposed. It's fascinating. He says on page 170, the number of Noah's priests is an intriguing case, and it can only be answered tentatively, but there are some clues, both in ancient practice and in the text itself. In the biblical period, priests in general were mentioned in the plural, and this is typical ancient Near Eastern practice. The text never says how many priests served in Noah's court. But the fact that the warrior Gideon instantly associated the priests of Noah with the abduction of 24 of the Lamanite daughters as soon as he learned how many of the young women had been taken, suggests that there were 24 priests on Noah's court. Mosiah 20, verse 5 and 17 and 18. Noah, of course, is not to be counted among those who carried off the young women because he was put to death by his own priests. But the vacancy created when Alma was expelled from court would probably have been filled with a replacement either shortly after the trial of Abinadi, I mean. Well, evidence from several periods of history. Now, this is interesting how Welch catches on to this important number symbolism. He's discussed the number symbolism in the number 10 in the scriptures before, and I've actually done some materials, some research on that. He says in different periods of history, this idea of the numbers 12 or 24, that is 2 times 12, these are often associated with judicial bodies or else judicial functions in ancient Israel. So we see the Book of Mormon right off the bat in the first chapter properly associating the correct number in that council of the god. And it was important enough that Lehi noticed it. He noticed the numberless concourses of angels. Numberless. That means there were thousands. And I showed you through the Kabbalistic interpretation of Moses on Mount Sinai, and further on in the record, and Ezekiel and Enoch, that they also saw these. But the number 12 is distinctly mentioned in Lehi's vision. And this is interesting how it ties in with the Book of Mormon and other ancient literatures. He says, I tried to get off this road, but boy, In the biblical period, the various courts were established in each of the 12 tribes. And we find this in Deuteronomy 16:18. Later literature in the Manual of Discipline from Qumran, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, asserted that when Jehoshaphat appointed Levites, priests, and elders as judges, this is in 2 Chronicles 19:8, he appointed 12 to each group. The Davidic tabernacle and Solomonic temple services were in continuous operation with 24 courses of priests. This is 1 Chronicles 24, 3 through 18. And when David appointed his prophetic cantors, he established 24 orders, each with 12 members. 24 priests are shown as a group in one depiction of Ramses' court in Egypt, and David and Solomon may have patterned their own priestly organizations after this numerical figure. It's interesting that it is reflected powerfully in our Book of Mormon. So, although direct evidence of duodecimal systems courts in pre-exilic Israel is lacking, indirectly and culturally related evidence gives the number 24 presumptive judicial significance in Lehi's day and before. So, the Book of Mormon taps into this. It's very interesting how that works. In the Dead Sea Scrolls from Qumran, the evidence for courts of this number becomes much clearer. In that legal system, judicial disputes were brought before a court called the Council of the Community. This deliberative body was composed of 2 panels of 12. 12 priests and 12 laymen for a total of 24 judges. Now, the commentary, or the Pesher, on Isaiah 54:11 and 12 that was found at Qumran, this states that these 24 judges were to give light by the judgment of the Urim and Thummim. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Further judicial significance for the number 24 appears in the New Testament Apocalypse, in the book of Revelation, where it's prophesied that 24 elders will judge the world. They're mentioned 12 times, interestingly, in the book of Revelation. And then he says, compare 2 Enoch chapter 4, verse 1. Similarly, in ancient Babylon, 24 star gods are said to judge the world. Now, of more direct relevance to the legal practice, and thus to Noah's court in the New World, is the fact that the early explorers in Central America reported that the indigenous king in highland Guatemala relied heavily on a council of 24 officials as he administered to the affairs of the state. So we have it in the Old World, and we also have it here in Mesoamerica, where the current thinking on the limited geographical model of the Book of Mormon matches the geographic situation in Mesoamerica, according to John Sorensen, John E. Clark, and now Brent Gardner. It's coming out now. We're discovering more and more tightly controlled situations with the Book of Mormon geography. And I'll have a chance to get into that also with you. The Supreme Council of the Monarch of Kecha was composed of 24 grandees with whom the king deliberated on all political, economic, and judicial matters as well as military affairs. These counselors were invested with great distinctions and many privileges. The administration of justice and the collection of the royal revenues was under their charge. Now, the possible connection between the priests of Noah and the number 24, and he's in Mosiah 25 and then 17 and 18, is further corroborated by the fact that this number is significant throughout the Book of Mormon